What if the dead were never the true terror waiting beyond the wall? Welcome, my friends. I'm Jon, and tonight we ride north into the cold heart of Westeros, where the wind carries old whispers through the snow and forgotten things stir beneath ancient ice. The wall still stands, for now. So draw closer to the fire, listen to the howl of the winter dark, and step with me into the shadows of Jon Snow, Anomaly. The wind came shrieking down from the heights beyond the wall, hard and cold enough to flay exposed flesh raw. Jon Snow stood atop the icy battlements of Castle Black, with Ghost beside him, both of them staring north into the darkening waste where the haunted forest swallowed the world whole. Dusk had settled across the snowfields in long blue shadows, and the last weak light of the sun glimmered against the wall like pale fire trapped beneath frozen glass. Below, torches guttered in the yard, while black brothers moved between stables and armory sheds, hunched beneath wool cloaks stiff with frost. Jon barely noticed them. His thoughts had gone north days ago, along with the rangers who had failed to return. Ghost lifted his great white head and sniffed at the air. The direwolf's red eyes narrowed, fixed upon something unseen beyond the tree line. Jon rested a gloved hand against the animal's neck and felt the coarse winter fur beneath his fingers. "You smell them too," he murmured softly, though whether he meant the missing men or something worse he could not have said. The wall groaned beneath his boots, deep and ancient, as if the ice itself remembered old fears. Maester Aemon had once told him that the wall was alive in its fashion, listening to the cold winds and the old powers moving in the dark. Tonight, Jon almost believed it. Behind him, boots scraped over frozen stone. Dolorous Ed emerged from the stairwell carrying a lantern whose dim yellow glow fought uselessly against the gathering gloom. Snowflakes hissed through the light like drifting ash. "You'll freeze solid standing there, my lord," Ed said in his usual dead voice. "Though I suppose that would save Bowen Marsh the trouble of arguing with you at supper." Jon glanced back with the faintest hint of a smile. Ed's long face looked even more corpse-like than usual in the lantern light, all hollow cheeks and weary eyes. "Any word from Eastwatch?" Jon asked. Ed shook his head slowly. "Nothing but wind and bad tidings. Cotter Pike says the sea's gone strange again. Dead seals washing ashore with blue eyes. Could be sailors' tales, though sailors lie even when asleep." Jon turned back northward. The mention of blue eyes tightened something cold inside his chest. 3 rangings had vanished in as many weeks near Greygate, an abandoned castle buried deep within the wall itself. The first had been 2 builders sent to inspect a collapsed tunnel. The second, 4 rangers dispatched to search for them. The third had included Sir Jeremy Riker's nephew and 6 seasoned men armed with fire-hardened spears and dragon-glass daggers. None had returned. No bodies, no tracks. Nothing except one horse found wandering south with its throat torn open and black blood frozen upon its flanks like tar. "Bowen wants the gates sealed after dark," Ed continued quietly. "Says we've too many wildlings inside already, and not enough food for the men we have." Jon heard the unspoken complaint beneath the words. Half the watch distrusted him for letting Tormund Giantsbane and his people through the wall. The other half merely feared what waited beyond it. "The gates stay open," Jon replied. "If the dead are moving again, every living soul north of the wall is another sword we may need." Ed scratched at his beard and sighed. "Aye. Well, I'd sooner trust a wildling than a corpse. Corpses are never grateful." The bells rang then, low and sudden through the gathering dark. One heavy toll, then another. Men in the yard stopped where they stood. Jon's hand went instantly to Longclaw at his hip, while Ghost bared his teeth in silence. The third bell rolled out across Castle Black like thunder beneath the ice, rangers returning. Yet no horn had sounded from atop the wall, and no sentry cried the call. Jon exchanged a sharp look with Ed before both men hurried toward the stair. The yard below churned with movement by the time they reached it. Brothers spilled from the armory, pulling on boiled leather and ringmail, while stable boys wrestled frightened horses back into their stalls. Snow whipped through the torchlight in wild spirals. At the outer gate, a knot of black-cloaked men had gathered around a single rider slumped atop a dying horse. The animal's chest heaved steam into the frozen air, its legs trembling so violently it could barely stand. Jon pushed through the crowd and seized the bridle himself. The rider wore black, though his cloak hung in bloody tatters. Ice crusted his beard and lashes white. Jon recognized him a heartbeat later. "Blackjack Bulwer," he said sharply. "Gods, what happened?" Bulwer's eyes fluttered open, dull with exhaustion and terror. He tried to speak, but only blood spilled from cracked lips. Jon caught him as he slid from the saddle. The man weighed almost nothing. Beneath torn furs, his skin felt deathly cold. "Greygate," Bulwer whispered at last. His voice sounded scraped raw. Men leaned closer despite themselves. Even the horses seemed uneasy, stamping and snorting clouds into the air. "We found them there." His fingers closed suddenly around Jon's wrist with startling strength. "But they weren't dead." A silence spread through the yard. Jon heard the creak of ropes overhead and the distant boom of the wind against the wall. Somewhere a dog began barking madly. Bulwer's eyes darted from face to face as if hunted by something only he could see. "The tunnel," he rasped. "There's something living in the ice. It wore their faces." One of the younger stewards muttered a prayer beneath his breath. Jon felt Ghost press close against his leg, hackles raised stiff along the direwolf's spine. "Get him inside," Jon ordered. "Now." The men moved quickly then, carrying Bulwer towards the king's tower while the horse collapsed dead behind them. Its body struck the frozen ground with a hard crack that made several brothers flinch. Jon remained standing in the yard for a moment longer, staring at the corpse. Black blood leaked slowly from the animal's nostrils onto the snow. He had seen blood like that once before, north of the fist of the first men, after a wight's hands closed around his throat in darkness and cold. Inside the king's tower, the fire burned high, though the warmth scarcely touched the room. Bulwer lay wrapped in blankets near the hearth, while Clytus cleaned the deep gash running across his ribs. The wound smelled wrong. Jon noticed it immediately. Not rot exactly, but something colder, fouler, like wet earth opened beneath ancient snow. Meister Aemon sat nearby in his wheeled chair, listening intently, while Bulwer drank hot wine with shaking hands. The old maester's blind white eyes remained fixed upon the ranger's voice, as though he could hear truths other men missed. "There were 7 of us," Bulwer said weakly. "We reached Greygate 3 days past. The tunnel mouth had collapsed inward, but we found another passage lower down beneath the ice." His breathing quickened as memory tightened around him. "We heard voices inside, brothers calling for help. Huck said it had to be survivors." Bulwer laughed then, a thin, broken sound that held no humor whatsoever. "It was Riker's voice we heard first, begging us to come deeper." Jon felt the room grow still around him. Flames crackled softly in the hearth, while outside the wind clawed at the shutters. "Go on," he said. Bulwer stared into the fire with hollow eyes. "The ice down there was black in places, veins running through it like frozen rivers. We found the others standing in the dark without torches, just standing there watching us." His hand trembled violently around the cup. Their eyes looked normal. That was the worst part. They smiled at us. Clytus crossed himself quietly. Even Eamon shifted uneasily beneath his robes. Jon leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "What attacked you?" Bulwer swallowed hard. "Not them. Something else." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Tall as a man, but bent wrong. Skin white as milk glass. It came crawling out of the ice itself." He shut his eyes tight. When Hake stabbed one of the dead men through the chest, black blood came pouring out. Then they all started screaming with the same voice. Ghost growled low in his throat. The sound filled the chamber like distant thunder. Jon rose slowly to his feet, every instinct warning him that this was no simple haunting and no ordinary rising of the dead. The others made corpses into servants. He knew that much. But this sounded different, stranger, as if something older had awakened beneath the wall itself. He looked toward Maester Aemon, hoping perhaps for wisdom, but the old man only turned his blind gaze toward the fire. "An old power," Aemon murmured softly, "something buried where it should not have been buried." The old maester's clouded eyes lifted toward Jon. "And now it wakes." Snow fell through the night in slow, relentless sheets that buried the yard of Castle Black beneath fresh white drifts by dawn. The wall loomed overhead like a mountain carved from pale death, its frozen face glowing blue beneath the weak morning light. Jon Snow had not slept. He stood alone inside the Lord Commander's solar with a cup of cold mulled wine untouched beside him, staring down at the crude map spread across the table. Greygate lay marked there in faded ink, one abandoned castle among many sealed and forgotten along the wall's immense length. Yet his eyes kept returning to it, as though the place itself exerted some silent pull upon his thoughts. Ghost lay beside the hearth, though the direwolf was restless. Every so often his ears twitched toward the north, and a low growl rolled from deep within his chest. Jon understood the feeling. Castle Black itself seemed uneasy. Men spoke in whispers this morning. Torches burned longer than usual despite the daylight, and brothers crossed themselves whenever Blackjack Bulwer's tale was mentioned. Fear moved through the watch like a winter sickness. Jon had seen it before at the Fist of the First Men, when seasoned rangers began jumping at shadows and hearing dead voices in the dark. A knock came at the door. Before Jon could answer, Bowen Marsh entered with Septon Chelidor close behind him. The Lord Steward's cheeks were red with cold and anger alike. "This madness cannot continue," Bowen said at once, not even bothering with courtesy. "The men are frightened, and now there's talk of sealing the tunnels entirely. Greygate should remain abandoned." Jon folded his arms across his chest. "Something is happening there. Rangers vanished. Brothers died. And more will die if you go chasing ghost stories into frozen ruins," Bowen snapped. The big man's soft face quivered with strain. "The wall protects us because we stay behind it." Chelidor smelled strongly of wine even this early in the morning. He tugged nervously at the crystal hanging around his neck. "There are tales," the Septon muttered. "Old tales from before Aegon's conquest. The Night Fort had such stories too. Things buried in ice, creatures the children made during the long night." Jon's eyes narrowed slightly. "What creatures?" The Septon hesitated. "Monsters meant to fight monsters. Men twisted by sorcery." Bowen scoffed loudly. "Drunken campfire tales." Yet Jon noticed the steward would not quite meet his gaze. Before he could press further, another knock sounded. Ed entered this time, snow dusting his shoulders. "There's a wildling at the gate asking for you," he announced. "Says he came from Hardhome with tidings. Looks half dead already, so he should fit right in here." Jon reached for his sword belt at once. Any word from Hardhome mattered. Thousands remained stranded there beneath hunger, cold, and worse things lurking in the forests and frozen shores. "Bring him to the common hall," Jon said, "and send for Tormund." The wildling collapsed before he reached the fire. Two black brothers caught him beneath the arms, while melted snow dripped from his ragged furs onto the floorboards. He was lean and hard-faced, with frost-bitten cheeks and cracked lips split open by the cold. Jon recognized him vaguely as one of Tormund's scouts. The man gulped greedily at hot broth before speaking. "Dead things moving east," he rasped. "Not many, maybe 20, maybe more." His eyes shifted uneasily around the hall. "But they ain't like before." Tormund Giantsbane arrived moments later, wrapped in a massive fur cloak, his broad face red from the cold. "What's this, then?" he demanded. The scout glanced toward him with visible relief. "Saw them near the frozen shore. They walked in daylight." That alone silenced the room. Whites hated sunlight. Jon had learned that much through bitter experience. "And?" Tormund pressed. The scout swallowed hard. "They talked." Several brothers muttered curses beneath their breath. Tormund's blue eyes narrowed dangerously. "Dead men don't talk." The scout looked toward Jon now, his expression pale beneath the grime. "These did. Called out in voices we knew. My brother's voice was one of them." He shivered violently despite the heat of the hall. "Said they'd found shelter beneath the ice and wanted us to come see." Tormund's thick fingers tightened around the haft of his axe. "You go near them?" "No," the scout answered quickly. "One of ours did. The dead tore him apart before we could pull him back." Jon exchanged a long glance with Tormund. The hall suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. He remembered Samwell Tarly's terrified voice, speaking of ancient books in the night fort, old records buried beneath dust and worm-eaten leather. Tales of things that had existed before the others became the terror of the North. Creatures created in desperation during the First War against darkness. Most Meisters dismissed such stories as nonsense born from fear and winter. Jon no longer felt certain. "The ranging leaves tomorrow," he said finally. Bowen Marsh stared at him, as though he had gone mad. "You cannot mean to lead it yourself." "I do." "Lord Commander?" "Enough." Jon's voice cut through the hall sharp as a blade. Silence followed instantly. He looked from face to face, black brothers and wildlings alike. "Whatever waits at Greygate is killing our men. If we hide behind the wall and pray, more will vanish." He rested one hand upon Longclaw's pommel. "I'll not send others where I will not go myself." Later, as dusk settled over Castle Black once more, Jon descended into the rookery tower, where Maester Aemon sat alone beside a narrow window. Ravens rustled softly within their cages, while cold wind seeped through cracks in the ancient stone. The old Maester looked terribly frail tonight, wrapped in layers of wool and fur that seemed too heavy for his thin body. Yet his voice remained steady when he spoke. "You seek counsel," he said before Jon uttered a word. Jon closed the door behind him. "You've heard tales like Bulwer's before." It was not a question. Aemon nodded slowly. "When I was young, an Archmeister came from Winterfell carrying fragments from very old chronicles. Most were destroyed during the Dance of the Dragons, but a few survived." His blind eyes lifted towards the sound of the wind outside. "They spoke of an anomaly beneath the wall, a thing neither living nor dead." Jon frowned. "Anomaly?" That was the word used in the old tongue, Aemon replied softly. The children of the forest supposedly created it during the long night. They sought a weapon against the others, something capable of surviving death itself. The ravens stirred uneasily at that, fluttering black wings against iron bars. But the weapon turned savage. It could mimic voices, faces, memories. Aemon's thin hands tightened around the arms of his chair. So the children entombed it within the ice beneath Greygate and sealed the passages forever. Jon felt cold despite the tower's warmth. You believe the story? I believe desperate men and desperate children once committed terrible acts to survive. Aemon sighed heavily. And I believe old evils seldom remain buried forever. Outside, the wind moaned against the wall like some giant beast grieving in darkness. Jon thought of the missing rangers standing silent in black ice with smiles upon dead faces. He thought of voices calling from the dark in tones men trusted. Why now? He asked quietly. Why awaken after thousands of years? Aemon was silent a long moment. At last he answered in little more than a whisper. Because the others are moving again. Winter stirs old powers, Jon Snow. Not all of them serve the same master. The ranging departed before sunrise. 12 black brothers rode out through the gate beneath a sky the color of iron, accompanied by Tormund and 6 wildling spearwives, hard as old oak. Snow crunched beneath hooves, while the great chains of the gate groaned overhead. Men watched silently from atop the wall as the party disappeared into the haunted forest. Jon rode at the front with Ghost, loping soundlessly beside his horse. Longclaw rested across his saddle, the pale wolf pommel gleaming faintly in the dawn light. The forest swallowed them quickly. Ancient pines crowded close together beneath blankets of snow, their dark branches creaking softly overhead. No birds sang here. No animals moved. Even the horses sensed it, tossing their heads nervously as cold mist drifted between the trees. Jon kept one hand near his sword, while his eyes searched the woods ahead. Somewhere beneath the vast frozen wilderness lay Greygate, and whatever nightmare waited inside it. By midday they found the first body. The corpse hung nailed to a weirwood tree, with rusted iron spikes driven through wrists and throat alike. Black rags flapped weakly in the wind around frozen limbs, stripped almost bare by carrion crows. Jon recognized the dead ranger from the remnants of his cloak. Hack, one of Bulwer's men. Snow had crusted over the corpse's face, yet the expression beneath remained horribly clear. The dead man was smiling. No one spoke for several moments after they found the body. The haunted forest stood silent around them, dark pines swaying softly as snow whispered through their branches. Huck's corpse creaked faintly against the weirwood tree whenever the wind stirred him. The old gods stared out through the carved red eyes above his head, pale sap frozen like blood down the trunk. Jon dismounted slowly, boots crunching over hard-packed snow, while Ghost circled the clearing with his nose low and tail stiff. The direwolf's lips peeled back from his teeth in a silent snarl. Tormund spat into the snow. This weren't done by whites. His voice sounded uneasy, despite the gruffness. Dead men don't hammer iron. One of the spearwives, a scarred woman named Yrsa, crossed herself in the wildling fashion by touching brow, lips, and chest. Nor smile after death, she muttered. Jon stepped closer to the corpse. Frost rimed Hake's beard white, but the dead ranger's eyes remained open beneath a crust of ice. They were not blue. They were black. Entirely black, as if ink had filled the sockets from within. Jon reached for the dragon-glass dagger at his belt. "Help me cut him down." The nearest black brother hesitated before obeying. Satin held the corpse steady, while Jon hacked through the frozen leather straps binding Hake to the tree. The body dropped heavily into the snow. For an instant, nothing happened. Then Hake's mouth twitched. Several men stumbled backward at once. Ghost lunged forward with a savage growl that shook the clearing. Hake's jaw worked slowly, cracking with stiffness as frozen lips peeled apart. A wet sound emerged from deep inside the corpse's throat. Jon seized the dragon-glass dagger tightly and knelt beside the body while the others watched in horror. The dead ranger's black eyes rolled toward him. "Jon," the corpse whispered. The voice was wrong. It sounded layered somehow, as though several men spoke together beneath the same breath. Jon felt the hairs rise along his neck. "What are you?" he demanded quietly. Hake's dead lips stretched wider into that awful smile. "Cold," the thing whispered. "So cold beneath the ice." Then its body convulsed violently. Black blood burst from the corpse's mouth in a steaming gush, splattering across the snow and Jon's gloves alike. Ghost tore into it before anyone else could move. The direwolf's jaws closed around Hake's throat with a crunch of bone and frozen flesh. Men shouted while horses reared in panic. The corpse jerked wildly beneath Ghost's weight, clawing at the snow with stiff fingers. But the wolf ripped deeper until the dead ranger's head nearly came free from the neck. Only then did the twitching stop. Silence crashed down over the clearing once again. Jon rose slowly to his feet, breathing hard. Black blood stained the snow around his boots like spilled tar. It smoked faintly in the cold air. Tormund stared at the remains with narrowed eyes. "That thing knew your name." Jon wiped his dagger clean against his cloak. It wore Hake's memories. Yet even as he spoke the words, doubt gnawed at him. The corpse had sounded almost aware, not mindless like the wights he had fought before. Something else lived behind those black eyes. They burned the body before moving on. Flames climbed greedily over frozen flesh, while oily smoke drifted upward through the trees. The smell was foul beyond description. Several men retched into the snow. Jon remained watching until only charred bones remained among the embers. He remembered the old bear's words from years ago. "Burn the dead, or else they return." But what they had just seen didn't feel like the work of the others alone. The farther north they rode, the stranger the forest became. By dusk, the trees grew twisted and sparse, their trunks half swallowed by ridges of ancient ice jutting from the earth like broken teeth. The cold deepened unnaturally. Jon could feel it even through layers of wool and fur. It was not merely winter cold, but something sharper, emptier, as though warmth itself had fled these woods long ago. No animal tracks marked the snow. Even the wind seemed reluctant to touch this place. "We camp here," Jon ordered as darkness gathered between the trees. No one argued. The horses were exhausted, and the men worse. They made a small fire beneath an overhang of black stone, while the spearwives erected rough shelters from hides and pine branches. Ghost vanished briefly into the dark before returning with blood upon his muzzle and a dead hair clenched between his jaws. Tormund laughed softly at that. "Your wolf hunts better than half the crows I've known." Jon managed a faint smile while skinning the hair near the fire. "He's smarter too." Yet his thoughts remained fixed on the corpse they had burned. Hake had spoken his name with recognition. Jon could still hear the voice in his mind, cold beneath the ice. He stared into the flames while snow drifted lazily beyond their glow. Somewhere out there, Greygate waited. Later that night, Satin took first watch while the others slept in uneasy silence. Jon rested lightly beside Ghost with Longclaw close at hand. He dreamed of Winterfell. Snow fell through the God's Wood while Arya chased him between the trees, laughing. Bran sat high among the branches, tossing walnuts down onto Robb's head. Then the laughter changed. It deepened strangely until it no longer sounded human at all. Jon opened his eyes instantly. The fire had burned low. Snow drifted through the dark camp in thin silver veils. For a moment, everything seemed still. Then he realized Ghost was gone. Jon rose quietly, sword already in hand. "Ghost," he whispered. No answer came. Nearby, Satin remained seated upon a fallen log facing the trees. At first, Jon thought the steward still awake. Then he saw the blood. A thin black line ran from Satin's nose down across his mouth and chin. The young man sat perfectly motionless with his eyes wide open toward the forest. Jon stepped closer, carefully. "Satin." No response. His hand tightened around Longclaw's hilt. Then Satin smiled. It happened slowly, unnaturally, the lips stretching wider than they should have. Jon jerked backward instantly as Satin's body rose with sudden violent speed. The steward's eyes had turned black, entirely black. "He's below," Satin whispered in that same layered voice. "Waiting." Jon slashed without hesitation. Longclaw sheared through Satin's neck in a burst of dark blood. The body collapsed into the snow, twitching violently, while shouts erupted across the camp. Men scrambled awake, reaching for weapons. Tormund came charging through the darkness with axe in hand, just as Ghost exploded from the trees behind him. The direwolf carried something human in his jaws. Ghost dropped the severed head at Jon's feet. It belonged to Othel Yarwick's nephew, Benathon, one of the builders traveling with the ranging. His dead face stared upward with frozen terror. Black blood dripped from the ragged neck stump into the snow. "Seven hells!" one of the brothers gasped. A scream echoed through the forest. Not nearby, far off, yet unmistakably human. Then another answered it. The woods erupted with voices after that, men shouting for help, women weeping. Brothers of the Night's Watch crying out from the darkness between the trees. Jon heard Gren's voice among them, though Gren had died years ago defending the tunnel beneath Castle Black. Tormund heard someone too. Jon saw it in the wildling's face. The giant of a man had gone pale beneath his beard. "They're not real," Jon barked sharply. "No one leaves the fire." But the voices kept coming. Closer now. Familiar voices. Trusted voices. Jon heard Robb Stark calling his name through the trees, sounding exactly as he had the day they parted at Winterfell. For one terrible heartbeat, Jon nearly turned toward it. Ghost saved him. The direwolf slammed against Jon's side with a growl so fierce it shattered the spell at once. Jon blinked hard and realized several men were already stumbling toward the darkness in a daze. One of the spearwives muttered prayers, while another wept openly. The voices had changed again. Now they were laughing. Something moved among the trees beyond the firelight. Tall, thin, wrong. Jon caught only glimpses between drifting snow and black trunks, a pale shape crawling sideways through the woods with impossible speed. Its limbs bent too many ways. Human arms, perhaps, but longer than they should have been. Its skin gleamed white as old bone beneath the darkness. Then it vanished. Tormund cursed violently. "I saw it." "Aye," Jon answered grimly. He could feel the fear spreading through the camp like poison. Men clutched weapons with trembling hands, while the unseen voices circled them in the dark. Every instinct screamed at Jon to flee south for the wall. Yet another feeling burned stronger beneath the fear now. Anger. Whatever haunted these woods was hunting them, and it knew exactly how to wear the faces of the dead. The voices lingered through the remainder of the night, circling beyond the firelight like wolves testing a wounded herd. No one slept after that. The brothers sat close together with weapons drawn, while snow hissed softly into the flames and vanished. Every so often, someone would stiffen at the sound of a familiar voice drifting between the trees. A mother calling her son, a dead brother begging for help. Once Jon heard Ygritte laughing softly somewhere in the darkness behind him, close enough that his chest tightened before reason returned. Ghost remained on his feet the entire night, prowling the edge of the camp with ears flat and teeth bared toward the forest. By dawn, the sounds had stopped completely. The silence felt worse. Jon stood beside the dying embers, staring north, while pale morning light filtered weakly through the trees. Satin's body had been burned before sunrise, though the smell still clung to the camp. Black blood stained the snow where the steward had fallen. Tormund approached, carrying 2 wooden cups of watered wine. "Your dead crow spoke before you cut him down?" the wildling asked quietly. Jon accepted the cup with numb fingers. "Aye." Tormund's expression darkened beneath his beard. "Then this thing's no servant of the White Shadows. Whites don't talk clever. They kill." He spat into the snow. "This one plays games." Jon drank little. His thoughts churned uneasily. The creature had taken Satin without a sound. No struggle, no scream. One moment the boy sat watch beside the fire, and the next he had become something else wearing his own face. Jon had seen men die before. Too many men. But this felt fouler somehow, as though death itself had been twisted into mockery. They broke camp quickly and continued northward through the frozen woods. The farther they traveled, the more signs they found that others had passed this way before them. Broken spear shafts protruded from snowdrifts, a torn black cloak frozen stiff beneath ice. Once they discovered the remains of a campfire surrounded by footprints that ended abruptly in the middle of an open clearing. No tracks led away. Yrsa muttered that the snow itself had swallowed the men whole. Near midday, they found Greygate. The abandoned castle emerged from the white wilderness slowly, half hidden behind curtains of blowing snow and ancient ice formations. Massive towers leaned drunkenly against the wall, where centuries of freezing winds had worn them down. Most had collapsed entirely. The gatehouse remained visible only because enormous sheets of ice encased it like glass over a corpse. Jon reined his horse to a halt beneath the shadow of the wall and stared upward. Greygate looked dead. Not abandoned. Not ruined. Dead. Black ice spread across the castle stones in strange branching patterns that resembled veins beneath pale skin. Jon had never seen anything like it before. The wall itself groaned overhead with deep cracking sounds that echoed through the frozen air. Tormund rode up beside him slowly. "Gods," the wildling muttered. "This place feels wrong." It did. The cold here cut deeper than ordinary winter. Jon felt it pressing against his skin even through layers of fur and boiled leather. Ghost whined softly beside his horse. The direwolf's red eyes remained fixed upon the gatehouse tunnel ahead, where darkness pooled thick beneath the ice. Jon dismounted carefully, while the others gathered close behind him. "Look there," one of the brothers whispered. Bodies lined the walls near the entrance. Some wore black, others wildling furs. All stood upright against the ice as though frozen in place while walking, men and women alike. Their mouths hung open in silent screams beneath layers of frost. Jon counted at least 30 corpses before he stopped trying. Black veins spread beneath their pale skin. A few had chunks of ice protruding through their flesh like crystal growths. "7 save us," Satin's replacement steward murmured hoarsely. Jon approached the nearest corpse cautiously. It was a wildling woman no older than 20 with one eye missing and frost coating her tangled hair. Her skin had fused partly into the black ice behind her. Yet when Jon touched her wrist through his glove, the flesh felt strangely soft. Not frozen solid, soft and warm beneath the cold. The corpse's eye opened. Men shouted in terror. Jon leapt backward with Longclaw already drawn as the woman's head turned slowly toward him. Her remaining eye was black as pitch. The frozen bodies lining the walls began twitching one by one with soft cracking sounds. Ice splintered outward around them. "Inside!" Jon roared instantly. "Move!" The party rushed toward the tunnel as corpses tore themselves free from the ice behind them. Some moved awkwardly, limbs snapping and grinding against frozen joints, but others ran with horrifying speed. Ghost lunged at the first creature to reach them, ripping out its throat in a spray of black blood. Tormund buried his axe into another corpse's skull hard enough to split it apart. Screams filled the air, while arrows flashed through drifting snow. Jon reached the tunnel entrance last. He turned in time to see one of the Black brothers dragged down beneath 3 dead wildlings clawing at his face and throat. Black blood splashed across the snow as the man vanished beneath them. Then something pale moved atop the ice wall above. Jon saw it clearly this time. The creature crouched upside down against the frozen stone like a monstrous spider. Its limbs were long and bone-thin, bending in ways no human body could. White translucent skin stretched tightly over a narrow frame, where dark veins pulsed beneath the surface. Its face looked almost human save for the mouth, which split too wide across the cheeks and revealed rows of tiny black teeth. Empty black eyes fixed upon Jon with terrible intelligence. Then it smiled. Ghost snarled savagely and sprang upward toward it, but the creature moved faster than sight. One instant it clung to the wall, the next it vanished into darkness above the tunnel. Jon felt cold dread settle deep inside him. The thing was leading them somewhere. "Lord Commander!" Tormund shouted. More corpses staggered from the snow outside. Jon backed into the tunnel entrance with the others as arrows and steel slowed the dead behind them. Once everyone remaining had crossed the threshold, he seized a burning torch from Yrsa and hurled it against a collapsed oil barrel near the gate. Fire exploded outward in a roaring wave. Flames surged across the entrance tunnel, engulfing the nearest corpses instantly. Black smoke billowed upward, while shrieks echoed through the frozen ruins outside. Jon shielded his face from the heat as burning bodies thrashed against the snow. The dead did not retreat. They kept crawling through the fire with skin melting from their bones until collapsing at last. Then silence returned once more. Only 8 of them remained alive. The tunnel beyond Greygate descended sharply beneath the wall through ancient stone passages crusted with frost. Their torchlight flickered weakly against black ice covering the walls in twisted veins. Water dripped steadily somewhere deeper below. Jon led the way carefully with Ghost stalking close at his side, while the others followed in grim silence. No one spoke about the men left behind outside. The air smelled strange underground, damp stone mixed with something sour and rotten lingering beneath the cold. Tormund dragged his axe along the wall as he walked, scraping frost from ancient carvings hidden beneath the ice. "Look at this," he muttered. Jon raised his torch higher. Faces stared back from the stone. Hundreds of them. Human faces carved directly into the tunnel walls, mouths open in agony, eyes wide with terror. Some looked Northmen, others appeared older, stranger, with sharp features Jon did not recognize. Ice had filled many of the carvings over centuries, making them appear trapped beneath frozen glass. "What is this place?" one of the brothers whispered. "No castle tunnel," Tormund answered darkly. "This was here long before your wall." The passage widened suddenly into a vast underground chamber. Men halted instinctively upon entering. The ceiling vanished high into darkness above, while enormous roots twisted through stone like the ribs of some buried giant. Black ice coated everything. At the center of the cavern stood a frozen weirwood tree unlike any Jon had ever seen. Its bark was black. Not burned. Black by nature, dark as coal beneath sheets of ice. Pale branches spread outward across the cavern's ceiling, while frozen red leaves remained hanging motionless despite the cold. Faces covered the trunk from root to crown. Thousands of faces, all screaming silently through the ice. And beneath the tree sat a man chained in bronze. At first Jon thought him dead. Ancient furs hung rotted from his skeletal frame, while frost-coated long white hair falling over his face. Yet as the party approached, the figure slowly lifted its head. Chains groaned softly in the silence. Its eyes opened. They were black, entirely black. And the chained man smiled. No man moved within the cavern. The only sound came from dripping water somewhere deep beneath the stone and the faint, crackling hiss of their torches struggling against the cold. Jon felt Ghost press close against his leg, every muscle in the dire wolf's body drawn tight as a bowstring. The chained figure beneath the black weirwood watched them silently. Frost covered his beard and brows in thick white layers, yet his skin looked strangely untouched by age. Not healthy, not living, but preserved, as though the cold itself refused to claim him fully. Tormund stepped forward first, axe raised. "What are you?" he growled. The man's smile widened faintly. Bronze chains rattled as he shifted against the roots beneath him. "That," he said in a dry rasp, "depends on what age asks the question." His voice sounded human enough at first, though beneath it, Jon heard something wrong. A second tone lingered beneath the words like an echo spoken half a heartbeat later. One of the Black brothers muttered a frightened curse. The chained man's black eyes moved toward him instantly. "You fear me," he whispered softly. "Good. Fear keeps men breathing." Jon studied the chamber carefully, while the others kept weapons trained upon the prisoner. Ancient runes covered the floor around the weirwood roots, carved deep into the stone in spiraling circles. Most were obscured beneath ice, though here and there he spotted symbols matching those Sam once showed him from old records of the first men. Protective markings, binding wards. The bronze chains themselves looked impossibly old, green with age yet unbroken. "You're the thing wearing dead men," Jon said flatly. The prisoner tilted his head slightly. "Wearing?" A faint chuckle escaped cracked lips. "No, I merely borrow what remains." His gaze settled fully upon Jon now. "You are different, though. I smelled it before you entered the forest." The black eyes narrowed with unsettling interest. Wolf blood, dragon blood, ice and fire tangled together in one soul. Tormund shifted uneasily beside Jon. "Don't listen to this creature." Jon ignored him. "Who chained you here?" For the first time, the smile faded. "The singers," the prisoner answered quietly. "The children. Long ago, when the world drowned in winter, and men were dying faster than snow could bury them." His voice echoed faintly through the cavern. "The white shadows could not be killed then. Steel broke against them. Fire failed. So the children made me." He lowered his gaze toward the black roots curling around his feet. "A weapon." The cavern seemed colder suddenly. Jon remembered Eamon's words in the rookery tower, a thing neither living nor dead. "You lie," one of the brothers spat nervously. "The children are gone." The prisoner looked toward him slowly. "Are they?" The man flinched beneath that stare. Jon noticed black veins moving faintly beneath the prisoner's pale skin, like worms beneath thin ice. Not blood. Something else. Tormund stepped closer to Jon, lowering his voice. "This thing's foul. We kill it now and be done." He tightened both hands around his axe. Jon almost agreed. Every instinct warned him this creature should never have existed. Yet questions still burned in his mind. "If you were made to fight the others," he asked carefully, "why imprison you?" The prisoner laughed then. The sound rolled through the cavern dry and hollow, but beneath it came another noise entirely. Hundreds of faint whispers layered together in the darkness. Jon saw several men glance around nervously toward the shadows. "Because I learned too well," the prisoner said at last. "The dead are obedient. The dead do not fear winter. The dead can cross any battlefield without rest or mercy." His black eyes fixed upon Jon once more. "The children feared what they had created." Ghost snarled violently. The direwolf lunged without warning. Chains exploded taut as the prisoner jerked backward, just as Ghost's jaws snapped inches from his throat. The creature moved with impossible speed, despite the shackles binding him. Black veins pulsed suddenly beneath translucent skin, while the cavern itself groaned softly around them. Jon grabbed Ghost by the scruff before the direwolf could strike again. Then the whispers began. At first they sounded distant, little more than murmurs drifting through the dark tunnels beyond the chamber. Slowly the sounds grew louder. Human voices. Dozens of them. Jon saw the remaining black brothers exchange terrified looks. One of the spear wives backed toward the tunnel entrance, clutching her spear tightly. "They found you," the prisoner said softly. A scream echoed from the passage behind them. The party whirled instantly. Torchlight danced wildly across stone walls as shadows moved within the tunnel. Something crawled there. Fast. Too fast for any human thing. Then pale faces emerged from the darkness, one after another. Dead men. Dead women. Black-eyed corpses shambling over the ice toward the chamber. "There's too many!" Yrsa shouted. The first corpse reached them with a shriek. Tormund split its skull open instantly, black blood spraying across the frozen floor. Jon drew Longclaw as the cavern erupted into chaos. Corpses flooded from the tunnel mouths surrounding the chamber, some armored in black, others wearing rotted wildling hides stiff with frost. Their movements looked jerking and unnatural, but faster now than before. Smarter. One of the brothers screamed as a dead ranger buried broken teeth into his throat. Another vanished beneath grasping hands near the tunnel wall. Ghost tore through the dead like white lightning, ripping limbs free and crushing skulls beneath powerful jaws. Yet for every corpse they destroyed, more emerged from the darkness. And above it all, the prisoner watched calmly from beneath the black tree. "Release me," he called over the screams, "or die here." Jon hacked apart a dead wildling, reaching for him while his mind raced. The bronze chains binding the creature glowed faintly now beneath the ice. Ancient magic, ancient prison. Yet the dead kept coming. One of the spear wives fell shrieking as black hands dragged her into the dark. Tormund roared curses beside Jon, while blood and firelight flashed through the cavern. "We need to move," Tormund shouted. "There is nowhere left to run," the prisoner answered before Jon could speak. His voice carried strangely clear through the battle. "The tunnels beneath Greygate stretch for miles. They belong to me now." Black veins crawled visibly across his neck and jaw. "Release me, Jon Snow, and I will command them to stop." Jon froze for half a heartbeat. The creature knew his name. A corpse slammed into him before he could think further. Jon crashed hard against the frozen floor while dead fingers clawed at his throat. The thing wore a black cloak torn nearly in half. He recognized the face instantly. Ben Stark. One of Winterfell's guardsmen from years ago. The dead man hissed through blackened teeth while Jon struggled beneath him. Longclaw had fallen from his grasp somewhere across the ice. Ben's dead eyes held no recognition, only hunger. Then Ghost struck from the side and tore the corpse away in a spray of black blood. "Jon!" Tormund's voice thundered across the cavern. Jon looked up sharply. The prisoner was standing. One of the bronze chains had snapped clean apart. The creature towered now beneath the black weirwood, taller than any ordinary man, though painfully thin. Frost cracked and splintered beneath bare feet as he stepped forward slowly. Black veins spread beneath his pale skin in branching patterns matching the ice coating the cavern walls. The remaining chains strained violently around him. "You cannot hold back winter with iron forever," he said quietly. Then every corpse in the chamber suddenly stopped moving. Silence crashed down. The dead turned together as one toward the black tree. Toward him. The creature closed its eyes briefly, almost savoring the stillness. When he opened them again, the blackness inside seemed deeper than before. Endless. Ancient. Jon felt cold, unlike anything he had ever known, spread outward through the cavern. "Look carefully now," the prisoner whispered. The corpses began kneeling. Every dead thing in the chamber dropped slowly onto one knee before the black weirwood. Heads bowed. Black blood dripped softly onto frozen stone while silence consumed the cavern entirely. And then Jon understood the terrible truth. This creature was not controlling the dead. The dead were worshipping him. The kneeling corpses remained perfectly still beneath the black weirwood, their heads bowed in silent reverence while torchlight flickered across frozen faces. No one among the living dared move. Jon could hear the harsh breathing of the survivors behind him and the faint creak of ancient roots twisting somewhere high in the darkness above. The creature stood at the center of the chamber like a king upon a ruined throne. Pale skin veined black beneath the ice-blue glow reflecting off the cavern walls. One broken chain dragged softly across the stone as he took another step forward. Tormund recovered first. "No more of this," the wildling growled, though fear roughened his voice. He surged forward with axe raised high. The steel came down hard enough to split a horse from skull to breastbone. The creature caught the blade bare-handed. The sound rang through the chamber like struck iron. For one impossible moment, Tormund hung there, straining against the axe, while black blood seeped slowly between the creature's fingers. Then the pale thing twisted sharply. The axe shaft exploded apart in Tormund's hands. Before the wildling could react, the creature struck him across the chest with the broken length of bronze chain. Tormund flew sideways through the air and crashed against the cavern wall hard enough to crack stone. "Tormund!" Jon shouted. The kneeling corpses rose instantly. The cavern erupted into slaughter once more. Dead hands clawed from every side, while the remaining brothers fought desperately to hold formation around the torches. Jon seized Longclaw from the ice and drove its Valyrian steel through the face of a charging corpse. The blade cut effortlessly, dark blood spraying across the frozen floor. Yet more dead poured from the tunnels beyond. Some crawled along the walls and ceiling like insects. Others moved with chilling coordination, driving the living backward toward the roots of the black weirwood. Ghost ripped out a corpse's throat beside Jon, while Yrsa buried her spear into another dead man's eye socket. "We can't hold them," she cried. Her voice broke with panic. Jon knew she spoke truth. Every fallen corpse simply rose again moments later, unless burned, and there was too little fire left now. The creature watched calmly through the chaos. "You understand now," he said to Jon. "The white shadows raise servants. I awaken memory itself." His black eyes drifted across the dead swarming through the cavern. Every fear, every grief, every soul swallowed by winter. He spread pale hands slowly. "Death remembers." Jon slashed another corpse apart while rage burned through his fear. "You murdered them." "No," the creature answered softly. "I freed them from fear." A dead ranger lunged toward Jon from behind. The creature raised one finger lazily, and the corpse halted mid-strike, as though jerked backward by invisible chains. "You still think like the living," he continued, clinging to names and flesh and little loyalties. His gaze sharpened. "But winter strips all men bare eventually." Tormund staggered upright near the wall, with blood pouring from his mouth. "Jon!" he roared hoarsely. "The chains!" Jon turned sharply. The remaining bronze shackles binding the creature ran deep into the roots beneath the black weirwood. Ancient runes glowed faintly where metal touched wood. The bindings still held him somehow. Barely. The creature noticed Jon's gaze. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. Ghost sensed it too. The direwolf bounded forward through the melee and slammed into the creature with all his weight. Black claws raked across white flesh, while Jon charged behind him with Longclaw raised high. The creature moved with terrifying speed despite the chains, twisting aside from Ghost's jaws and catching Jon's sword arm mid-strike. Cold exploded through Jon instantly. Not ordinary cold. This was deeper, older. Jon felt memories tearing loose inside his mind like leaves in a storm. Winterfell buried beneath snow. Ned Stark standing silent in the Godswood. Ygritte dying in his arms. Robb's voice fading into death beneath the red wedding screams. The creature's black eyes widened suddenly. "Ah," it whispered. Jon felt it searching inside him. Not reading thoughts, consuming them. The thing smiled slowly. "You carry death already, Jon Snow." Its fingers tightened painfully around Jon's wrist. "More than most." Jon gasped as frost spread across his glove and skin beneath. Ghost tore into the creature's shoulder savagely, ripping away chunks of pale flesh blackened underneath like rotten meat. The creature hissed sharply and released Jon at once. Jon stumbled backward, breathing hard. His arm felt numb to the elbow. Frost coated the leather of his glove. Yet the creature seemed wounded now. Black blood dripped from torn flesh where Ghost had bitten him. More importantly, the broken bronze chains hanging from his limbs glowed brighter each time he strained against them. "Fire!" Jon shouted suddenly. Burn the roots. Yrsa understood first. The spearwife snatched a torch from the ground and hurled it directly into the weirwood roots beneath the creature's feet. Flames caught instantly. The creature screamed. The sound shattered through the cavern with such force that several men collapsed, clutching bleeding ears. Every corpse in the chamber convulsed violently. Black veins pulsed beneath dead flesh, while the creature staggered backward against the tree. Flames spread hungrily across ancient roots coated in old sap and dry rot hidden beneath the ice. "No!" the creature roared. The dead attacked with renewed fury after that. Jon barely blocked a rusted sword swung by a corpse wearing Night's Watch black. Another dead man seized his cloak from behind before Ghost dragged it away, snarling. Tormund fought like a wounded bear near the tunnel entrance, smashing corpses apart with the splintered remains of his axe handle. Yet all eyes kept returning toward the burning tree. The black weirwood was screaming too. Faces carved into the trunk writhed beneath the flames as if alive. Thousands of mouths opened in silent agony, while sap the color of dark blood bubbled from cracking bark. The creature staggered wildly against the roots, black veins spreading rapidly across his pale skin now. "You fools," he hissed through clenched teeth. "Do you know what sleeps beneath this place?" Jon advanced toward him carefully with Longclaw ready. "I know enough." "No," the creature whispered. Fear touched his voice then. Real fear. "You know nothing." Oh, the cavern shook. Stone cracked somewhere deep below them. Men stumbled as the floor lurched violently beneath their feet. Dust and shards of ice rained from the darkness overhead. The dead paused briefly, turning their black eyes downward toward the frozen earth. Then came the sound. A heartbeat. Slow, vast, ancient. The entire cavern pulsed with it. Boom. Jon felt it through his boots. Another heartbeat followed moments later, stronger than before. The black weirwood trembled violently as fire spread higher through its branches. The creature stared downward with widening eyes. "No," he whispered again. Boom. The frozen floor split apart beside the roots. A jagged crack ripped through stone and ice with explosive force. Black mist poured upward from the depths beneath the cavern, carrying a smell so ancient and foul that men recoiled, gagging. The dead backed away instinctively. Even the creature staggered from the fracture in sudden horror. Something moved below. Jon saw it only briefly through the widening chasm. A colossal shape shifting far beneath the earth, beneath layers of darkness and black ice. Not human. Not dead. Vast, pale limbs curled beneath the roots like the body of some buried god. The creature looked toward Jon then with terror plain upon his face. "That," he rasped, "is why they chained me here." The cavern groaned around them like a dying beast. Cracks spread rapidly through the frozen floor, while black mist poured upward from the widening chasm in thick, twisting coils. Men stumbled backward in terror, clutching weapons uselessly as ancient stone split apart beneath their feet. The dead had retreated from the fracture entirely now. They stood motionless at the edges of the chamber with black eyes fixed downward, not obedient anymore but afraid. Jon had never imagined the dead could fear anything. Another heartbeat thundered from below. Boom! The sound shook ice loose from the cavern ceiling. Great frozen shards crashed downward among the roots with explosive force. One crushed a kneeling corpse flat against the stone, though the dead thing still twitched beneath the weight. Ghost snarled savagely at the widening darkness, while his white fur bristled from neck to tail. Tormund staggered beside Jon, breathing hard. blood soaking the front of his furs where the bronze chain had struck him. "What in all the frozen hells is that?" the wildling demanded. The creature beneath the weirwood looked smaller now, despite his unnatural height. Firelight danced wildly across pale skin veined black, while flames climbed higher through the screaming tree behind him. "The first mistake," he whispered. His black eyes never left the chasm. Before the others, before the wall, before men remembered fear. The cavern trembled again. The singers carved into powers they could not command. Jon tightened his grip on Longclaw. "Speak plain." The creature laughed bitterly. "You still think there are plain truths in this world?" He glanced toward Jon sharply. "The children made weapons during the long night. Many failed. I was one." Another heartbeat rolled upward from beneath the earth. The creature visibly flinched. "But beneath this place sleeps the thing they feared most. The thing that taught them terror." His voice lowered to a near whisper. "The thing that taught death to wake." The crack in the floor widened suddenly with a deafening roar. A pale arm burst upward through the ice. Not human. Vast. Skeletal. Fingers long as spears tipped with black claws curved like hooked blades. The limb clawed blindly against the edges of the chasm, while ancient ice shattered around it. Several corpses nearby were dragged screaming into the darkness below. Jon heard them breaking apart in the depths. Men panicked instantly. One black brother bolted toward the tunnel entrance, only for dead hands to seize him from the shadows. Another dropped his sword entirely and began babbling prayers through chattering teeth. Yrsa slammed the butt of her spear against his chest. "Move or die, Crow!" she snarled. The creature beneath the tree turned toward Jon urgently now. "Listen carefully. If that thing wakes fully, the wall itself will fall." Jon stared at him coldly. "Why should I trust anything you say?" Black blood trickled from the creature's mouth as the burning roots tightened around his legs. "Because I am trying to survive." His gaze hardened. "And because only I can force the dead back long enough for you to escape." Another colossal claw ripped upward from the darkness below. This time the chamber ceiling cracked apart. Ancient roots tore free from stone, while black ice exploded outward across the cavern walls. The dead shrieked together in one terrible voice. Jon saw movement below the chasm then. Something enormous shifting upward through endless dark beneath the earth. Not climbing, rising. Ghost backed away, growling low in his throat. Jon's mind raced. The creature was a monster. Of that there could be no doubt. Yet terror filled its black eyes now, and the dead themselves recoiled from whatever slept below Greygate. Fire spread through the black weirwood rapidly. Soon, the entire cavern would collapse. Tormund grabbed Jon's arm roughly. "We leave now." "If we run," the creature rasped sharply, "it follows." His gaze fixed desperately upon Jon. "The chains. Break them all." Jon stared at him in disbelief. "You expect me to free you? I expect you to choose which nightmare survives the night." The words struck hard, because Jon understood their truth immediately. He looked toward the chasm again. Another pale limb emerged from below, enormous claws scraping against ancient stone. Frost spread outward from the darkness in jagged waves. The air itself seemed to die around it. Jon felt warmth draining from his body with every heartbeat echoing upward. Boom! The wall groaned somewhere far above. The creature saw hesitation flicker across Jon's face. "I was made to command death," he said quietly. "That thing consumes it." Black veins pulsed violently beneath translucent skin. "Free me, and I can hold it here." flames reflected in his endless black eyes. "Leave me chained, and every corpse from here to Winterfell will rise before the moon turns." Jon remembered Hardhome then, thousands of dead things moving through snow and darkness, while pale shadows watched from the woods. He remembered the fist of the first men covered in corpses with blue eyes, blazing beneath the cold stars. Winter was already coming south. If this horror escaped beneath the wall... He made his choice. "Break the chains," Jon ordered. Tormund stared at him like a madman. "Have you lost your bloody senses?" "Do it!" Jon roared. Ghost lunged toward the nearest bronze chain at once. His massive jaws closed around the ancient metal, while Jon drove Longclaw downward against another binding wrapped deep within the burning roots. Valyrian steel struck bronze with a burst of sparks. The chain cracked. The creature screamed. Not in pain. In relief. Every corpse in the cavern convulsed violently as the remaining shackles shattered apart one by one. Black blood erupted from their mouths and eyes. The creature staggered free from the burning weirwood, while darkness rolled outward beneath his feet like living smoke. Then everything stopped. The dead froze motionless. Even the monstrous claws emerging from the chasm halted mid-motion. The creature stood at the center of the cavern with arms spread wide and black veins blazing beneath pale skin. His voice echoed outward, layered with 1,000 others beneath it. Sleep. The dead collapsed instantly. Every corpse in the chamber dropped lifeless onto the frozen stone. The colossal claws withdrew slowly into darkness below. The heartbeat ceased. Silence returned. Jon breathed hard while smoke and ash drifted through the ruined cavern. The creature lowered his arms gradually. For the first time since they had entered Greygate, he looked exhausted. Truly exhausted. Black blood streamed from his nose and mouth, while the cavern continued trembling around them. "It will not sleep long," he said quietly. The burning weirwood cracked apart behind him with a thunderous sound. Flames raced upward through black branches while the cavern ceiling split wider overhead. Massive chunks of stone began crashing down around them. "We have to go," Yrsa shouted. The creature looked toward the tunnel entrance leading south beneath the wall. "That path remains open," he said weakly. "For now..." Jon hesitated. "You're coming with us." Tormund swore violently under his breath. The creature laughed softly. "No." He turned toward the burning chasm instead. "This prison was built for a purpose." Jon stepped forward angrily. "You said only you can hold it." "I can." The creature's smile returned faintly, though sadness touched it now. "For a little while longer." The cavern shook again. Deeper this time. Boom. Black mist surged upward from the chasm once more. The creature glanced back toward Jon Snow. "You carry strange blood, wolf boy, ice and fire tangled together." His black eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "If the long night comes again, remember this truth." The smile faded from his pale face. The dead are not the enemy. They are only the doorway. Before Jon could answer, the creature turned and walked directly toward the abyss. Darkness gathered around him as he approached the edge of the chasm. Corpses nearest his path began twitching once more, slowly dragging themselves upright with black eyes blazing. Yet they did not attack. They followed him instead. The cavern began collapsing in earnest after that. Jon seized Tormund by the arm and forced him toward the southern tunnel, while stone thundered down behind them. Ghost bounded ahead through clouds of ice and dust. The surviving brothers and spear wives fled close together as the world shattered around them. Behind them, deep within the collapsing cavern, something enormous screamed. And another scream answered it. The tunnels beneath Greygate shook violently as Jon and the survivors fled southward through darkness and falling ice. Stone cracked overhead in deafening bursts, while clouds of frost and dust rolled after them like a living storm. Ghost ran ahead through the narrow passages, white fur flashing in the torchlight whenever the direwolf glanced back to ensure Jon still followed. Tormund half-dragged one wounded brother beside him, while Yrsa brought up the rear with spear clenched tight beneath one arm. No one spoke. Breath steamed harshly through the freezing dark as the mountain above them seemed intent on burying every living soul beneath it. Another terrible scream echoed behind them. Not human. The sound rolled through the tunnels deep and ancient, filled with a hunger so vast that Jon felt it in his bones. The torch in his hand flickered violently. Somewhere far behind them came the answering roar of the chained creature they had freed. Then the cavern collapsed entirely with a thunderous concussion that hurled men from their feet. Jon slammed hard against the tunnel wall. Ice exploded across his shoulder and cheek. For several moments all he heard was ringing silence and the rumble of distant stone falls. Then Ghost's growl cut through the haze. "Up!" Tormund barked roughly, hauling Jon upright by the arm. Blood streamed down the wildling's forehead into his beard. "Tunnel's coming down!" Jon staggered forward again, with Longclaw still clenched in numb fingers. The passage ahead sloped sharply upward now toward faint gray light somewhere in the distance. Cold air flowed through it, carrying the smell of snow and pine. They burst from the tunnel mouth moments before the ceiling collapsed behind them. The survivors stumbled into daylight beneath the wall amid a storm of blowing snow. Greygate groaned around them like a dying fortress. Entire sections of the abandoned castle were sinking inward as ancient ice shattered apart beneath the earth. Jon dropped to one knee, breathing hard, while Ghost paced restlessly beside him. Then the wall trembled. Not a groan, not shifting ice. A true tremor. Snow cascaded from the heights above in vast white curtains. Men stared upward in horror as deep cracks spread across sections of the wall near Greygate, thin at first, but widening steadily through the ancient ice. Tormund cursed softly beneath his breath. "Gods preserve us." A sound like thunder rolled beneath their feet. The frozen ground outside Greygate erupted. Ice exploded skyward in a shower of shattered crystal and black earth. Something enormous struck from below the ruins of the castle, sending towers collapsing outward into clouds of snow and debris. Jon glimpsed pale flesh beneath the chaos. Limbs, claws, far too many of them. Then the storm swallowed the shape entirely. "Ride!" Jon shouted. The survivors sprinted for their horses, tethered deeper within the forest edge. Animals screamed in terror as the earth continued shaking beneath them. Jon vaulted into the saddle while Ghost bounded alongside. Behind them, Greygate vanished beneath collapsing ice and spiraling black mist pouring into the storm. And still the wall shook. They rode hard through the haunted forest with ruin at their backs. Snow blinded them at times, reducing the world to little more than white wind and dark trees flashing past in broken shapes. Several horses nearly broke legs on hidden roots beneath the drifts. Jon kept glancing north despite himself, half expecting something colossal to burst through the woods behind them. Nothing followed. That frightened him more. By nightfall they reached an abandoned wildling village half buried beneath snow. Only 6 remained alive now. 2 black brothers, Tormund, Yrsa, Jon, and Ghost. The others had vanished during the collapse, or died beneath the dead in Greygate's tunnels. They sheltered inside a sagging long hall where rotten sealskins still hung from the walls and old bones lay scattered across the floor. Tormund barred the door himself, while Yrsa lit a small fire from broken furniture. No one spoke for a long while. The storm howled outside around the ruined village, while exhausted men sat staring into the flames. Jon's shoulder throbbed fiercely where falling ice had struck him. Blood crusted stiff across his cloak and gloves. Yet his thoughts remained fixed upon the creature beneath the black weirwood. The Anomaly. A weapon made during the long night. He had freed it. "You trusted him," Tormund said at last. Jon looked up sharply. The wildling sat across the fire holding a wineskin against cracked ribs. His broad face seemed older tonight somehow. "I trusted what frightened him," Jon answered quietly. Tormund grunted darkly. "Could be he lied. Could be." Jon stared into the flames. But the dead feared whatever slept below Greygate. Silence settled again after that. One of the Black brothers shifted uneasily near the fire. "What happens now?" he asked. Jon did not answer immediately because the truth sat heavy inside him. The wall had cracked. Something ancient had stirred beneath it. And somewhere within the ruins of Greygate, a creature neither living nor dead battled horrors buried since the first long night. "We warn Castle Black," Jon said finally. "Then winter fell." He glanced toward the storm outside. "If the wall falls..." A distant horn interrupted him. All heads snapped upward instantly. 3 long blasts drifted faintly through the blizzard beyond the village. The call of the Night's Watch. Others. Ghost was already on his feet, snarling toward the darkness outside. Jon rose at once with Longclaw drawn, while Tormund seized his axe. Another horn blast echoed through the storm, weaker this time and much closer. Then came the screaming. Men stumbled into the village moments later. Black brothers, half frozen, bleeding, terrified. The first collapsed through the doorway, clutching a shattered spear. "Castle Black," he gasped. "They came through the woods." Snow and blood covered his face alike. "Dead things everywhere." Jon caught the man before he hit the floor. "How many?" The ranger's eyes were wide with horror. "Thousands." The fire crackled softly in the silence that followed. Jon felt cold settle deep inside his chest. "Blue eyes?" he asked quietly. The ranger shook his head weakly. "Black." They rode through the night without rest. The storm had begun to weaken by midnight, yet bitter winds still tore across the haunted forest, carrying curtains of snow through the dark pines. Jon led the survivors south at a punishing pace, while the ranger's warning echoed endlessly through his mind. Thousands. Not whites with frozen blue eyes marching beneath the others, but black-eyed dead walking from Greygate itself. Whatever had awakened beneath the wall, its shadow was spreading faster than Jon had feared. Ghost ran ahead through drifting snow, vanishing and reappearing like a pale spirit between the trees. The direwolf had not stopped growling since the ranger delivered his warning. Every so often Jon glimpsed movement in the darkness beside the trail, shapes pacing them beyond the torchlight, watching. Before dawn, they found the first bodies. 3 black brothers hung upside down from the trees beside the King's Road, with their throats slit ear to ear. Blood had frozen black against their cloaks and pooled beneath them in dark, glassy stains. Jon recognized one immediately. Mully, a steward barely 16 years old. His face looked pale and peaceful despite the horror done to him. Too peaceful. Jon dismounted slowly while Snow drifted through the branches overhead. "Don't touch them," Tormund warned sharply. Jon halted. The corpses were moving. Barely noticeable at first, fingers twitching weakly, lips parting in tiny, silent breaths. Then Mully's eyes snapped open all at once, black as pitch. The dead boy smiled down at Jon through frozen blood. "Too late," he whispered. Ghost lunged instantly. The direwolf tore Mully from the tree hard enough to rip the corpse nearly apart. The other dead brothers convulsed violently as Yrsa drove her spear through one skull, while Tormund hacked apart the third with savage blows from his axe. Black blood sprayed across the snow in steaming arcs. Jon cut Mully's head clean off before the dead boy could rise again. But the words remained. Too late. They reached Castle Black shortly after sunrise. Smoke drifted upward beyond the wall long before the fortress itself came into view. Jon saw it through the trees first, and felt dread twist deep inside him. The main gate stood open. One of the towers near the eastern stair had collapsed entirely, spilling shattered stone and timber across the yard below. No sentries watched from atop the wall. No horns sounded. The silence was wrong. Jon spurred his horse forward at once. They passed beneath the gate into chaos. Bodies littered the yard beneath fresh snow. Black brothers, wildlings, horses torn apart where they had fallen. Fires still smoldered near the armory while blood streaked frozen paths across the ground toward the Lord Commander's tower. Jon dismounted beside a corpse wearing Night's Watch, black with half its face missing. Ghost prowled ahead silently, red eyes scanning every doorway and rooftop. "Castle Black?" Jon shouted. No answer came. Then something moved atop the wall. Jon looked up sharply. Bowen Marsh stood upon the icy battlements staring down at them. Snow whipped around the Lord Steward's heavy frame, while black blood stained the front of his cloak. For one brief heartbeat, Jon felt relief. Then Bowen smiled. Black eyes gleamed from beneath the falling snow. "Jon Snow," he called warmly, "you came back." Tormund swore beside him. Kill him now. But before Jon could move, shapes began emerging across the yard. Dead brothers stumbling from shattered buildings, wildlings dragging broken limbs through the snow. Men Jon knew. Men Jon had eaten beside for years, all with black eyes. All smiling. The gates slammed shut behind them. Chains rattled overhead. "We've got company," Yrsa muttered grimly. The dead closed in slowly from every side, not rushing, herding. Jon counted dozens at first, then hundreds appearing along the walls and towers of Castle Black. The black-eyed dead moved with terrible calm, no shrieking madness like ordinary wights. They watched. Bowen Marsh descended the stair alone. Snow crunched softly beneath his boots as he crossed the yard toward Jon, with hands spread peacefully. Half his throat had been torn open, yet he walked without difficulty. Black veins crawled visibly beneath his pale skin. "You should have stayed in the cave beneath Greygate," Bowen said gently. "He could have hidden you from what's coming." Jon stepped forward with Longclaw drawn. "What are you?" Bowen chuckled softly. Still asking the wrong question. His ruined throat bubbled black blood down his chest. The wall cracked, Lord Commander. That was all it needed. His dead eyes drifted upward toward the towering ice above them. Now the old places are waking. The wall groaned then. Every man in the yard looked upward instinctively. A deep crack split across the ice high overhead with a sound like distant thunder. Snow poured downward from the heights. Jon saw fear ripple even through the black-eyed dead around them. Not panic, anticipation. Another horn sounded suddenly. One long blast. Everyone turned toward the gate tunnel. A figure emerged slowly from the blowing snow beyond. Tall, pale, barefoot. The Anomaly. Bronze chains hung broken around his wrists while black blood covered half his body. Huge wounds split open across his chest and shoulders where flesh had been torn nearly to bone. Yet he still walked. Corpses nearest the gate recoiled from him instinctively. Bowen's smile vanished. "You survived," the dead steward whispered. The Anomaly's black eyes swept across the ruined yard before settling on Jon. Barely. His voice sounded weaker now, strained beneath layers of exhaustion. He glanced upward toward the wall. "It's coming." The dead attacked immediately after that. Hundreds surged across the yard at once with black hands clawing through falling snow. Jon met them head-on beside Ghost, while Tormund and Yrsa formed around the Anomaly near the gate. Longclaw hacked through dead flesh and bone in flashing arcs of dark steel. Ghost tore out throats beside him savagely. Yet more dead flooded from every tower and tunnel. Bowen Marsh reached Jon through the chaos. The dead steward moved fast despite his ruined body. A rusted dagger flashed toward Jon's ribs. Jon parried hard and slammed Bowen backward with his shoulder. "You opened the gates," Jon growled. Bowen laughed wetly through his torn throat. "No, you did." The words struck like a knife. "Free me, and I can hold it here." Jon realized the truth too late. The Anomaly had never escaped Greygate alone. It had spread through the dead the moment Jon shattered the chains. The wall shook violently. A colossal crack thundered across the ice from east to west. Men screamed. Towers collapsed. The ancient wall split apart above Castle Black as something vast pushed upward beneath it. Jon saw pale claws the size of ship masts burst through the ice, while black mist flooded into the sky. The Anomaly looked upward grimly. It found the surface. Castle Black erupted into ruin. Ice crashed downward in enormous slabs, crushing dead and living alike. Jon dragged Tormund clear of a falling tower, while Ghost vanished beneath clouds of snow and debris. The Anomaly raised both hands toward the wall and screamed something in a language older than men. Every corpse in the yard froze instantly. Then they turned together toward the wall, toward the thing emerging through it. The dead charged as one. Hundreds of black-eyed corpses hurled themselves at the colossal pale limbs tearing through the shattered ice above Castle Black. The creature beneath the wall screamed with a voice that split the morning sky apart. Jon glimpsed only fragments through the storm of falling snow and stone. Vast white flesh, endless claws, mouths opening beneath the ice itself. The Anomaly staggered beside Jon, black blood pouring from his eyes now. "Run!" he rasped. Jon grabbed him roughly. "Come with us." The pale creature smiled faintly through the blood. "There's nowhere left for me to go." The wall collapsed. Not all at once. Slowly. Terribly. Ancient ice broke apart across miles of frozen stone, while the dead hurled themselves screaming into the widening fractures. The Anomaly remained standing amid the chaos, with arms raised toward the rising horror beneath the wall. And somehow the thing stopped rising. For one impossible moment, the world held still. Then the Anomaly turned his black eyes toward Jon Snow one final time. "Remember," he whispered. The wall came down on top of him. Jon never saw the body buried beneath the avalanche of ice and stone, only darkness swallowing everything north of Castle Black while the earth shook beneath his feet. Tormund dragged him clear as the last standing tower collapsed into the storm behind them. Hours later, far south of the ruins, Jon reined his horse upon a snowy ridge and looked back. The wall was broken. A jagged wound stretched across the horizon where ancient ice had once stood unbroken since the dawn of memory. Smoke and black mist drifted upward into the pale winter sky. Somewhere beneath those ruins slept horrors older than kingdoms. Ghost appeared beside him silently, fur white with snow and ash alike. Jon rested one hand upon the direwolf's neck, while cold wind swept across the north. The dead were no longer the enemy. They had only been the warning.
Друзі, це був Джон. І знаєте, після цієї історії в мене залишилось дивне відчуття холоду. Але не того зимового холоду зі снігом і льодом, а чогось більшого, людського. Мені здається, найстрашніше в таких історіях це не чудовиська і не темрява за стіною, а найстрашніше, коли люди починають думати, що заради виживання можна переступити будь-яку межу, виправдати будь-яку річ, якщо вона обіцяє безпеку або силу. І я думаю, ми всі іноді бачимо це тільки у вигаданих світах. Людина дуже легко звикає до страху, а коли страх стає звичним, він починає змінювати нас тихо, майже й непомітно. Спочатку ти просто хочеш урядуватись, потім контролювати ситуацію, а потім уже не помічаєш, як сам стаєш частиною темряви, від якої тікав. Мабуть, саме тому такі історії залишаються з нами надовго, бо вони нагадують, що справжня межа між світлом і темрявою приходить не десь у льодах півночі, а всередині людини. І, чесно кажучи, це набагато тривожніше за будь-якого монстра. З вами був Джон. До наступних відео.